Hi, welcome to Story Mode, the place where you'll find the stories you've been waiting for. Today, we're continuing the story, How I Became the Greatest Mage Ever. Chapter 5, Days Before the Final Annual Assessment. Ms. Young's eyes settled upon Bryan. Bryan, do you really have the audacity to step forward? An entire semester has gone by, yet you still can't control a single fire element star, and your stardust is so dim it's practically invisible. Give us a break, will you? Jack immediately interjected. There had been a final exam at the end of the previous semester to assess the students' cultivation progress. Unsurprisingly, Bryan's fire element stardust remained the exact same as when he just awakened. The entire class knew about this, and it had given Jack and Caleb something to laugh about. A fool is a fool. Awakening the fire element was utterly useless for him. He would never become a mage in his lifetime. Your innate talent for the fire element is actually quite good, so why is your cultivation so weak? Bryan, many people yearn to become fire mages. You already possess an advantage that most others lack, so you simply cannot afford to slack off, Ms. Young said, gazing at Bryan with a hint of disappointment in her voice. I understand, Ms. Young. Bryan nodded. After undergoing meditative cultivation, a mage's mental power becomes formidable, so formidable in fact, that it can pick up on details imperceptible to ordinary people, including the distinct aura of other mages. By gauging the intensity of this aura, one can roughly determine the level of a mage's cultivation. One's true cultivation level cannot be concealed, a fact Bryan had learned very early on. However, there was a crucial caveat. If Bryan were to suppress his lightning elemental power and project only the aura of his fire element, others would perceive nothing but that fiery presence. They would be able to assess the proficiency of his fire element, yet remain completely oblivious to the existence of his other element. Thus, Bryan could routinely use his fire element as a smokescreen to throw people off the scent. I was just about to start studying the fire element, and now, such a formidable fire element instructor has arrived right on cue. It looks like there's a real chance I'll be able to master the casting of Fire Burn, a basic tier skill, before the major assessment. Bryan's confidence surged instantly. Huh? Why is that girl staring at me with such a peculiar look in her eyes? Her name is Sophie Larson, I believe, one of the top students in the class and a fire element user. Bryan was utterly baffled. Surely he hadn't done anything to offend this girl named Sophie, had he? Why then was she looking at him with such hostility? Meanwhile, Sophie frowned. Upon noticing that the academic slacker, that guy named Bryan, was looking right back at her, she immediately shot him a fierce glare. Sophie was displeased, deeply displeased. Why on earth did this slacker Bryan awaken fire element? And also, why was it a more superior fire element than her? Their homeroom teacher, Mr. Martin, had said that Bryan's fire element was the finest fire element awakened in their entire class, manifesting visible flames during his awakening ceremony. And now, even the formidable Ms. Young was praising his talent. Forget it! There was no point getting worked up over such an unmotivated slacker. In any case, anyone who failed the annual assessment would be promptly expelled from the school. This guy had, at most, just another 6 months left slacking off. She simply couldn't stand it. He was a guy from a destitute background, someone whose family had practically sold off every last possession just to allow him a chance to get into Skybird Magic High School. And yet, even after awakening a fire element, he remained utterly lazy and wasting his talent. Did he have no sense of duty toward his family? Had his conscience been devoured by dogs? Thanks to Jack, practically everyone in the class knew that Bryan had been, essentially, shoved into the school through his dad, which had to sold everything to get him a spot. Your homeroom teacher, Mr. Martin, has already mentioned to me just how important the annual assessment is. Ms. Young, will you be teaching the elite class? A boy asked. Yes, once I finish teaching you guys, I will be taking over as the practical studies instructor for the elite class. Ms. Young nodded slightly. Ms. Young maintained her gentle smile. It was evident that her very first lesson today had been quite a success, as the students' enthusiasm for learning had been thoroughly ignited. That's right. Once any of you can fully control 7 starseeds, feel free to come see me privately. I'll set aside some of my personal time to provide you with additional guidance, Ms. Young continued. Controlling 7 starseeds instantly became the ultimate goal for everyone in the class. I'm not far from reaching 7 starseeds now, Ms. Young. Just you wait for me. Seriously, how many have you mastered to control? 2. Get lost. I can control, haha. 3? And you actually have the nerve to act high and mighty here? I'm nearly at 4 myself. Don't you realize it gets harder and harder the further along you get? A few student chatter in joy. Hilarious. Just hilarious. You bunch of losers. Caleb has already mastered 5 stars. Even if he slacks off and only trains sporadically next semester, he's practically guaranteed to hit 7. Jack immediately sneered. For real? 5? How on earth did he manage to cultivate that fast? That's absolutely insane! Listening to the chatter of the surrounding classmates, Caleb felt his head begin to swell with pride. That guy Jack. He might be a bit dim-witted and unreliable in his actions, but he possesses one truly remarkable talent. Whenever Caleb is too proud to seek attention directly, yet desperately craves the spotlight, Jack knows exactly the right moment to step in. Life is just like playing League of Legends. It's not enough just to be good at the game yourself, but also having a teammate that knows you and know how to coordinate. Sweltering air surged over range after range of mountains, sweeping away the languid spring atmosphere of this southern region and ushering in the cool mountain breezes and swirling mists of summer. Hard on its heels came a sudden, unheralded downpour. Fallen leaves and withered blossoms lay scattered across the ground. Moon City was a place that, generally speaking, still observed the changing of the seasons, yet at times it could be utterly capricious. Just this morning, the sun had blazed high in a cloudless sky stretching for miles. Yet, after merely taking an afternoon nap, one might have thought they had traveled to another dimension. The wind was now raging, and the sky was thick with ominous clouds. By evening, the rain had turned icy cold, and the gale was biting. Is a typhoon on its way? This damn weather! It's like it's on a random shuffle, just playing whatever season it feels like, whenever it feels like it, Avery grumbled from inside the dormitory. Avery, aren't you a wind elementalist? Come on, go out there into the gale and give it a try. See if you can cast your basic tier wind spell. Wind track, suggested one of his roommates. And you're a freaking water elementalist, so why don't I see you conjuring up a body of water? You call yourself a dignified water mage, yet you still carry an umbrella when you go out? Aren't you ashamed to even admit that to people? Bryan lashed out at their roommate, tearing into him with a blistering tirade. Indeed, a water mage really ought to wear a trench coat on a rainy day, striding with solitary pride through a world where earth and sky merge into one, remaining untouched by a single drop. The trouble was, with the annual assessment fast approaching, and most students had only managed to master 3 to 4 stars, they were still far from able to cast their basic element skill. Avery, can you really use wind track now? Come on, show the guys here what you've got. To be honest, aside from seeing that brute Sophie Larson unleash Fireburnt, none of us have actually seen anyone in our class successfully cast a complete spell yet, said the dorm leader, a guy who spent his days spouting all sorts of lewd fantasies about their teacher. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm not 100% sure that I can cast it successfully yet, Avery replied, looking a bit sheepish. Come on, Avery, give it a shot. I'd love to see what a wind element skill actually looks like too, Bryan said, his eyes lighting up as he set aside the theoretical textbook he'd been studying. It's too crowded here. What about the hallway? The hallway stretches out plenty far. All right then, I'll give it a try. Just keep in mind, I'm really not all that proficient yet, Avery said, nodding. It was already the end of the semester, and Avery had certainly proven himself to be quite gifted. He was already one of the few students in their class who had successfully mastered 7 stars. Everyone was curious about every element of magic, so naturally, They wanted to see how well Avery could perform his skills. Avery closed his eyes and began to enter the casting state. His preparatory movements were very slow. Clearly, his control over the stardust was not yet particularly refined. He maintained a steady breathing rhythm. With every breath, the sound of air rushing through his nostrils could be heard. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, the books lying on the desk began to flutter open. The old, rickety door of the dormitory began to creak and rattle wildly. Dust swirled up from the floor, even sweeping up a pair of dirty briefs that had been stashed under a bed. Wind track, swift movement. Avery's entire demeanor transformed. His eyes took on a cerulean hue, and the hems of his clothes whipped about wildly. The moment he finished his incantation, the various odds and ends scattered around the dorm, toothbrushes, cups, and even a metal rack, suddenly began to clatter and collide as they all shifted along a specific, designated trajectory. Bryan hurriedly focused his gaze. Amidst the scattering debris and swirling dust, he made a surprising discovery. A peculiar current of air had materialized within the dorm. Whoosh! Suddenly, Avery's figure blurred. Avery, who just moments ago had been standing motionless in the center of the dorm room, suddenly started flying at an unbelievable speed. Accelerating to blistering speed, he burst out of the dorm and raced furiously down the corridor toward the restrooms at the far end, following a faint, shimmering trail of wind visible in the air. "That's amazing!" the whole dorm shout. The entire group in the dorm room immediately crowded out the door, craning their necks to watch Avery. However, in the brief moment it took for everyone to step out of the room, Avery had already zipped out of sight. It was too fast! Compared to this speed, even the world's fastest sprinters would look like a snail. A ripple of excitement stirred within Bryan. This is only the entry-level wind element skill, and it was already this amazing. The sensation of sprinting while riding upon a trail of wind must feel absolutely incredible. Ah! Help! Help me! Boom! The corridor suddenly gave an inexplicable shudder. Just as Bryan was thinking, Avery, who was still in the distance, slammed full force against the door of the communal restroom. Water sprayed wildly from a crooked faucet. The restroom door, already dilapidated, had been completely blown off its hinges on one side. The trail of wind finally dissipated, leaving Avery lying rigidly on the ground, blood still trickling from his nose. The dorm group quickly gathered around and dragged Avery back into their room as if nothing had happened. Bryan quietly withdrew his head from the doorway. Once the dorm supervisor came storming up the stairs, bellowing in rage, Bryan and his group retreated to their bunk and pretended as if none of this had ever happened, nor have anything to do with them. Wind element skills certainly felt impressive. That movement speed was easily on par with, if not faster than, a car cruising at a steady pace. The only downside was that Avery's driving skills were clearly substandard. He hadn't the faintest idea how to brake. "You bunch of little bastards! The annual assessment is just around the corner. Instead of meditating quietly like you're supposed to, you're out here tearing down the building. If I catch you, I'll fry you alive." The dorm supervisor's furious roar echoed through the entire hallway, cutting through the sounds of the wind and rain outside. The annual assessment had finally arrived. For many students, today was a nightmare. For them, they are facing the possibility of being expelled from the school. Just thinking about returning home in disgrace and having to face their parents. Yet, the study of magic wasn't a children's game. Every magic high school adhered to very strictly, because the path of a mage is beyond dangerous. They are the front line to humanity. Those who can't master their magic were promptly dismissed to seek other paths, sparing them from wasting their precious youth drifting aimlessly within the boundless ocean of magic. Conversely, for those students who had trained diligently and strived ceaselessly, today was the day to prove their worth, especially for that select few academic prodigies who had already mastered the ability to cast spells. The typhoon season had passed. The morning dawned bright and clear, with the crisp, refreshing air characteristic of late summer. Inside the Luna family estate, Caleb, Make sure you put on a good show today. You know as well as I do that our family allocates cultivation resources to its younger generation every year. This allocation depends partly on which branch family has made the greatest contributions, and partly on the cultivation achievements of the younger generation themselves. You really need to bring honor to your branch. Early that morning, Eric personally drove Caleb to school in a large black sedan. Eric was a member of the board of directors at Skybird High School, and today's annual assessment was being personally presided by him. Caleb was his nephew after all. Eric wanted Caleb to bring him some credit, especially with the other board members present to witness it. "Uncle, rest assured," Caleb declared with absolute confidence. After saying that, Caleb suddenly recalled something. His eyes darted to the side as he asked in a low voice, "Uncle, I heard that Ashley will also visit Skybird High School today?" Indeed. Today is a momentous day for Skybird High, so Ashley has returned early from the Imperial Capital Institute for her summer break. While she is here, she can also observe our annual assessment and evaluate the caliber of this year's student, Eric remarked. Observing the nervous on Caleb's face, Eric naturally understood exactly what the boy was thinking. "Rest assured, when your assessment comes around, I will personally guide everyone over to watch. Just show them how diligent you are. Also, once everyone see how talented you are, perhaps you will also be granted the use of a Stardust magic artifact for an extra 2 or 3 months." A Stardust magic artifact? Is that true? I actually have a chance to be allocated a Stardust magic artifact? Caleb's eyes lit up with a brilliant, dazzling gleam. Naturally. What do you think sets us apart from ordinary mages? Superior genetics? Upbringing within an illustrious family? No matter how fine those things are, they still couldn't be compared to the amount of resources we have, and a Stardust artifact is just one of them. If you manage to become a core disciple of the family, you'll be allocated a Stardust artifact, and your cultivation level will absolutely leave every other student in the entire school in the dust, Eric declared. "Uncle, I promise I'll give it my absolute best," leaving every other student in the entire school in the dust. Caleb felt his entire being surge with excitement. Every mage has a finite amount of time available for cultivation. For apprentices like them, 5 hours of meditation is essentially the absolute limit. The remaining time can only be spent studying theory and acquiring general knowledge. Yet, the Stardust artifact is the most coveted, the most dreamed of, nourishing vessel for any mage's cultivation. Caleb didn't know the exact mechanics behind the Stardust artifact, but he knew that it allowed a cultivator to rapidly recover their energy after the onset of training fatigue, effectively shortening their recovery time. Generally speaking, after 5 hours of meditation in a single day, the remaining 19 hours could essentially only be spent on other activities. These 19 hours constituted the meditation fatigue period, a stretch of time that could only be passed by engaging in other tasks or simply by sleeping. For many students aspiring to advance further, this 19-hour recovery period feels truly interminable, yet it is an unavoidable reality. After sustaining such intense mental concentration, one inevitably requires an extended period to allow the nerves to settle. Otherwise, the mind risks total collapse. The Stardust artifact, however, is a miraculous cultivation tool capable of significantly shortening this very recovery period. Shortening the recovery time after meditation practice is, in essence, equivalent to extending the total amount of time one can dedicate to meditation each day. A day or two might not yield any drastic results, but after a month or two, a distinct gap will begin to emerge between the user and those cultivating without a Stardust artifact. If one were to possess it for 2 or 3 months, or even indefinitely, they would truly leave their peers several blocks behind. Meditation efficiency varies from person to person. Some are naturally faster, others slower, but for the moment, let us set those individual differences aside. With the aid of the Stardust artifact, even those with inherently low efficiency can find themselves leading the pack. As for those who are both gifted and diligent, for them, the results would be nothing short of spectacular, achieving twice the progress with half the effort. Uncle, Caleb asked, his voice tinged with excitement, you mentioned to me earlier that students in the elite classes have a chance to be allocated a Stardust artifact. Is that truly the case? Yes, since this is a school, naturally there are some cultivation resources available. However, the school's resources are extremely limited.